A harda agus a hamrádatha is mis a Graham a Harrickdán agus chear cheann fórum poblúchtach sosiálach fadar íhónal. Ba má linn fáilte a chuir roimh chuig an láthair starúil sa thuga son saoirse na hÉireann agus an látháchtach seo is star na hÉireann. Tá iad an seo le ó más a thabhairt donna léicre a héad son saoirse na hÉireann ach tá iad an seo ní amháin leis a níbart a chomára ach leis an phoblacht féin a héit siad son heilire agus a eileamh. Friends and comrades, may I introduce myself. My name is Graham Harrington, and on behalf of the Peadar O'Donnell Socialist Republican Forum, we would like to welcome you all to this historic spot. Before we begin our ceremony, can I just remind you of the need to observe the appropriate social distance along with the advice provided by the HSE in this time of pandemic. Comrades, we have gathered here in Kilmichael, where a century ago the gallant men of the West Cork Flying Column attacked and overwhelmed a convoy of the Royal Irish Constabulary's Auxiliary Division. In doing so, they made a massive contribution to Ireland's struggle for independence and indeed encouraged other subject peoples to do the same. We are honoured to be here and stand in awe of and solidarity with their courage on that day in 1920. But I also take this opportunity to greet Sean Kelleher, son of Tom, one of the heroes who took part in that legendary engagement. Dús Gleam Noel Murphy le Frogra na Cásca Lev Inish. I shall now call upon Noel Murphy to read the proclamation of the Irish Republic as proclaimed on Easter Monday morning, 1916.
Rialtas Shaladog Phoblacht na HÉireann le Muintir na HÉireann. Ara agus a bhná na HÉireann in anam dé agus glúnta na marmh ó na bhain si an sean tradiisiún mar náisiún. Tá éire tríne ag garam a clanne chun bhratí agus ag bóla buile ar son na saoirse. Tá réis de agar agus ilúnt a chur ar a chuid fear tríne heagríocht rúnda réamhlódach bráthurachas Phoblacht na HÉireann agus tríne heagríochta mílite oscailte óglaigh na HÉireann agus anam cathartha na HÉireann. Tá réis de a rábhéis a thuairt go féinach chun fearfachta agus feithimh go fáile sin inis agus le takeíocht ó na clán atá ar deoraíocht Americá agus ó chóghólathe calma san Eorop ach ag seasamh de ar an neart dílis féin ar an géadscó tá sí ag bóla buile agus i lán dóthasach go mér an bua aici. Déir hamíd bor ceart cenasach do lóta ó ceart bhainte na HÉireann a ríise na HÉireann agus ar chócht gan cosc ach inúnt na HÉireann. For gháil an ceart sin atá I himirt le fada ag pobl agus rialtas achtanach. Níor a bhóg sí an ceart sin ná ní féidir í a bhóca go brach ach le ddíthú Muintir na HÉireann. Ach glóan dar tháinig dearbhaigh Muintir na HÉireann in os a dhearbhaigh siad faoi armé. Ag seasamh doing ar an gceart buna sin Phoblacht na HÉireann ina stáit cenasach neamhsplách agus chuirmíd ar meo féin agus beo ar gompánach aram in ngéil le na saoirse, le na leas agus le na móra a measc na náisiún. Dilíonn Phoblacht na HÉireann agus élíonn le seo díolteacht mhuintir uile na HÉireann, idir éir agus bhná. Rahíonn an Phoblacht saoirse creidimh agus saoirse síbhialta, cócearta agus códhéisina dar saoránaigh uile. Agus gach fátaí clanna uile an náisiún a chuomhnú go cothrom, gan bhean aici gan beann aici ar na difríochtaí a chothaigh rialtas cóthaíoch go chóramach idir agus a dheall. Go dtí go dtiocfaidh an uair dá neart anhearm rialtas náisiúnta buna bhanú a dhéanaigh an idíocht do bhaintir uile na HÉireann agus a thógfar le bhótaí a chuid fearr agus a bean uile déanaigh an rialtas Shaladach a bhaintear leis seo gnáthí síbhialta agus mílite na poblachta a réir an tíbhas thar ceann na muintere. Chuirmíd cúis Phoblacht na HÉireann faoi chumarcha Diamor, agus ilachhocht, agus impiamid, evanach an narum. Eramid, gach een dinne aves ekfonov, so shin, de haringt asenore hi le muiliachus, le mi donocht, na le slad. Son oor ibroch hok shop is dual gash nation na herden, a chrohu. Lenne mishnach, agus lenne dia umper, agus le til a clanne, a yibort fein, agus son na masanip tibli, pibli, go dillen she on ream, ro osel is dan de. Sheena her son on realtus, so shadadok, Tomas O'Clerig, Sean McDermide, Tomas McDonough, Padraig McPearus, Eamon Kant, Seamus O'Kenneally, agus Joseph O'Plunkade.
Ramatagot and all. Akarja, we are very pleased to have with us today Nurse Patricia Campbell, one of those people doing so much to keep us all safe. Patricia has long been a political activist and a dedicated trade unionist. Patricia is going to read for us Luke Kelly's evocative poem, For What Died the Sons of Roisin. Patricia.
For what died the sons of Roisin? Was it fame? For what died the sons of Roisin? Was it fame? For what flowed Ireland's blood in rivers that began when Brian chased the Dane, and did not cease nor has not ceased with the brave sons of 16. For what died the sons of Roisin? Was it fame? For what died the sons of Roisin? Was it greed? For what died the sons of Roisin? Was it greed? Was it greed that drove Wolfe Tone to a pauper's death in a cell of cold, wet stone? Will German, French or Dutch inscribe the epitaph of Emmet? When we have sold enough of Ireland to be but strangers in it, for what died the sons of Roisin? Was it greed? To whom do we own our allegiance today? To whom do we owe our allegiance today? To those brave men who fought and died, that Roisin live again with pride. Her sons home to work and sing, her youth to dance and make her valleys ring, or the faceless men who for mark and dollar betray her to the highest bidder. To whom do we owe our allegiance today? For what suffer our patriots today? For what suffer our patriots today? They have a language problem, so they say. How to write no trespass must grieve their heart full sore. We got rid of the strange language now, and we are faced with many, many more. For what suffer our patriots today?
Comrades, as is our custom, we shall now reflect on and pay tribute to all of those who have given their lives in the struggle to establish an independent and sovereign Irish Republic. While we pay tribute to all those who have died in this grandest of causes, today in particular we remember volunteers Tim Sullivan, Mick McCarthy, August Pat Deasy, who fell here at Kilmichael on the 28th day of November 1920. We call on all who join us across the country and abroad to join with us in a minute's silence. Grimaragiv Galer. Gleum an fibre Norman O'Rourke, Queena a Chianum Inish. Norman. A hamrádathe, B'malum a oirí ginish, Lake Dar, Linna Féin, Ogluck, Stalcór Scríb Nor, agus Canrodí son Glúiseacht, Hoshíloch Lesh, an Óréad a Howard. Comrades, Tommy McKerney, Chair of the Pater O'Donnell Socialist Republican Forum, will now deliver an oration. Tommy is a former member of the IRA and political prisoner, having spent 16 years in jail, during which time he endured 53 days on hunger strike in 1980. Describing himself as a socialist Republican, since his release in 1993, he has immersed himself in left-wing politics and trade unionism. He was an active participant in the anti-household charges and right-to-water campaigns and spoke on Lexit platforms in the North during the British referendum on European Union membership. He is the author of The Provisional IRA from Insurrection to Parliament and one of the joint authors of Between Sectarianism and Neoliberalism. He also writes a regular column for the monthly publication Socialist Voice. Tommy.
Margaret Graham, a smorm of road ben Shaw and Ewer and Sod Stariul Shaw, agus Tom Ansasta ben Shaw, go Luder, Le Mock, Tom Kelleher, and Lake Shin. Comrades, when Tom Barry deployed the men of the West Cork Flying Column on this spot a century ago, no one could possibly ever underestimate the extent of the challenge they faced, nor indeed the extent of the victory they achieved. Not only were they waiting to engage the most lethal, the most brutal, Indeed, the most feared members of the British Crown's armed forces, but even more ominous, they were challenging the empire itself. An empire that was the largest this world has ever known, and which believed that the sun would never set on its power and might. An empire that was cunning and devious in its administration of affairs, ruthless in its execution of power, and utterly barbaric in the treatment of its subjects. This was the global superpower that made war on the east coast of China in order to force the Chinese people buy opium from the British East India Trading Company. The empire that devastated the African continent and transported its people into slavery to labour in North America and the Caribbean. This was the ruling class that plundered the wealth of the Indian subcontinent, eventually leaving it poverty-stricken, torn by civil war, and finally partitioned. This was the great power that had callously and consciously developed an economic system in Ireland that caused 1 million of its people to die from hunger. And, believe it, that happened in spite of the fact that at that time this country was deemed by the British to be constitutionally an integral part of the United Kingdoms of Great Britain and Ireland. Nevertheless, and in spite of such constitutional smoke and mirrors from the British, this country was ever treated with disdain by the overlords sitting in London. The London Times, that mouthpiece of British establishment, once infamously indeed described this island as fit only to be a breakwater to spare the English homeland from the ravages of the wild North Atlantic. British establishment's view of the population of this island was equally contemptuous, equally disparaging and racist. And as was frequently illustrated by the pages of Punch magazine, the empire's ruling class viewed Irish people as either amusing simpletons or violently dangerous thugs. A people they saw fit only to act as servants, manual labourers or cannon fodder in the armies of the empire. It was widely promoted within the powers of London that the Irish were indeed incapable of self-government. However inaccurate the British ruling class view of Ireland's people, there was no similar misconceptions held by the people of Cork about their rulers. They well understood the power and the evil force that they were taking on, both here immediately in Kilmichael and in the wider context of a struggle against imperialism. Let's keep in mind too that the men of the West Cork Flying Column were not professional soldiers with the benefit of years of intense training, nor were they equipped with the very best of modern armaments and an endless supply of ammunition. On the contrary, they were local men who had volunteered to serve their cause and did so from a sense of duty to their people rather than with any prospect of material reward. It was no accident, therefore, that Tom Barry had to opt for the high-risk strategy of placing his men in alarming proximity to the enemy and with no prospect of escape or retreat if the engagement did not work out as planned. Because, as he was to record in his memoirs, there is no such thing as a bad shot at 10 yards. It was an incredibly hazardous strategy that succeeded because of the tenacity and courage of the incredibly brave men of the West Cork Flying Column. Courage, indeed, that had an impact even greater than the military defeat of the Royal Irish Constabulary's Auxiliary Division here at Kilmichael. The myth of invincibility surrounding the auxiliaries, and more significantly even, that of their employers, was forever broken as a result of this engagement. And greater still was the message being delivered from rural County Cork to the imperial overlords in Britain. Rural people in one of Ireland's most westerly regions, a people looked down upon and treated with the utmost disdain by the British ruling order, had devised a strategy and implemented it with skill and discipline that the empire could not suppress. With unbreakable and incredible support from the local population, Tom Barry and the West Cork Flying Column rendered government by London impossible. In short, the Crown writ had been supplanted by that of Dáil Éireann, a fact that was subsequently reinforced when Barry's men defeated the British Army's attempt to capture and crush the Volunteer Army at Crossbarry. Tom Barry, along with heroes such as Tom Kelleher, along with the West Cork Flying Column and the unbending, loyal support of the local population, had created a template capable of causing the British Empire to disintegrate. Devious but far-sighted Crown agents in London recognised this and began to work on a change of strategy. A strategy as old as Sparta, a strategy as old as Rome, a strategy as old as Byzantium, a strategy based on identifying and cultivating division. Having successfully exploited sectarianism to cause division in the north, the Empire began to work on class division in the south. Recognising the obvious, vastly differing priorities that existed between the merchant princes of Cork City and its urban working class, between large wealthy farmers and those with small holdings, between the affluent members of the Dublin Chamber of Commerce and the capital's labouring people reorganising then around the Irish Transport and General Workers' Union, those British masters of manipulation and subterfuge set in motion a process that would ultimately serve the Empire's interests in Ireland, whatever appearances might exist to the contrary. What the treaty delivered was not by any definition the Republic, nor in spite of claims was it a stepping stone to the Republic. It was, to all intents and purposes, the Home Rule settlement of 1912, including partition, with a few cosmetic additions affording a fig leaf to its political apologists and, equally important, to its bloodthirsty, ruthless enforcers. As Padre O'Donnell was to say, Collins was prepared to climb down from the high ground of the Republic to the low ground of Home Rule, but only for a united Ireland. And then when he had accepted that, Padre O'Donnell said, when the time came to invoke the boundary clause on which Griffith and Collins rested their case to the people, it was used to make the treaty a worse instrument than the Act of 1920, on that issue that transcended all other issues, that of partition. And now, comrades, a century later, it is time to reflect on what has happened in the intervening decades and where we stand today. Our island remains partitioned, and as we saw recently on our television screens, a division that is maintained by a British ruling class still adept at and still prepared to use state terrorism in order to enforce its will in Ireland. Discouragingly too, we still have a governing class in the 26 counties that is reluctant to speak of Irish unity, and as with supporters of the treaty, fearful of its consequences. A ruling class more comfortable with commemorating the Black and Tans and with remembering those who struggled for a sovereign independent republic. A ruling class so supine that it included enemy names on a monument to the dead of 1916, shamefully erected in the National Cemetery of Glasnevin, where rests the remains of so many of our patriot dead. We could be critical, very critical, of those in office both north and south. There is indeed much to be critical about, but let us leave it at that. We have come here today to celebrate and to commemorate and to pay tribute to the heroism of those who gathered on these rocky slopes on that cold, wet November day in 1920 to do battle on behalf of the Republic. To do battle that we might establish a sovereign independent republic across the length of this island. Those men of the West Cork Flying Column wrote a glorious page in Ireland's history that day. More than that, they have provided us with inspiration. They have left us with the certain knowledge that we, the people, have within us the ability and the power to take control of our own destiny without depending on others to deliver for us. They have taught us that we are justified to hold on to a vision of an Ireland not only without artificially created divisions among working people, but also an Ireland that is truly, finally independent. A land that no longer provides logistical support for a foreign army travelling through Shannon Airport on its way to devastate and dominate unfortunate peoples in the Third World. A land in which its government is no longer so eager to ingratiate itself with foreign capital that it cravenly agrees to make its people pay the gambling debts of European bankers. A land that has finally broken the connection with its long-time imperial master, and where we can finally replace the name of Protestant, Catholic and Dissenter with the honourable title Citizen of the Irish Republic. Let us therefore leave this historic spot, dedicating ourselves to pay the only tribute worthy of the men who fought and died here on behalf of the Irish Republic a century ago. That is to renew our efforts to build that truly sovereign and genuinely independent Irish Republic for which they so willingly give their all. Gur míle maith agah.
Go raibh míle maith agat a Tommy. Glíomhnaí inis Jimmy Corcoran le slíocht an chlár Déanlachach don éanú Ish Fihid a léamh. Before leaving this historic place, it is only right that we should remind ourselves that the most fitting tribute that we can pay to those gallant men who fought here at Kilmichael is to endeavour to complete the task of building an independent and socialist Irish Republic. Therefore, I would call on Jimmy Corcoran of the Communist Party of Ireland to read a paragraph from a document entitled A Democratic Programme for the 21st Century, a document outlining the essential requirements if we are to achieve a republic worthy of the generations who have struggled in its pursuit and worthy of the support of the generations to come. Jimmy.
Comrades and friends, the proclamation of the Irish Republic declared that the right of the Irish people to ownership of Ireland, to the unfettered control of Irish destinies, to be sovereign and indefensible. Patrick Pearse stated that the nation's sovereignty extends not only to all the natural material possessions of the nation's soil and all its resources, all wealth and all wealth-producing processes within the nation. In other words, no private right to property is good as against the public right of the nation. James Connolly stated that the reconquest of Ireland involved taking possession of the entire country, all of its powers of wealth production and all its natural resources, and organising these on a cooperative basis for the good of all. In April 1916, he stated to the Irish Citizen Army that we are out for an economic as well as political liberty. 100 years on from Kilmichael, Ireland is still dominated by imperialism and lacks any meaningful democracy, sovereignty or independence. Imperialism is the extension of the system of capitalism globally as capital reaches beyond the borders of the state and incorporates peoples, countries and regions in its economic order, subordinating them to its own interests, its own needs and interests. Imperialism dominates Ireland through its domestic and international agents. The domestic includes successive Irish governments, the mainstream political parties, native capitalists and their associations, and their ideologues in the universities and in the media. While the international include the European Union, the European Central Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the global corporations that invest or establish operations here, and powerful states such as Britain and the United States. The recurring political, social, economic and cultural failings that beset Irish society cannot be resolved without recognising the reality of imperialism and challenging it at every opportunity. This is not a new understanding. It is the political analysis of Pearse and Connolly, and it is the central message they brought to the 1916 Rising and to the Irish Revolution. The demand for real democratic control in a sovereign, independent Irish Republic was the practical means of securing the needs and interests of the Irish people. For them, political and economic freedom were inseparable. The one could not be achieved without the other. Connolly had earlier argued that completing the political revolution on its own, ignoring the need for revolution in the economy, would be futile. As he said, England would still rule you. She would rule you through our capitalists, through our financiers, through the whole array of commercial and individualist institutions she has planted in this country. In the Ireland of today, dominated by imperialism, there is no real democracy, sovereignty or independence. The people cannot determine their own lives or control their society. One obstacle to the people exercising democratic control is the existing system of liberal democracy. Having the right to vote every 5 years for one party or another to govern us is not democracy and gives no real control over the decisions that affect our lives. The institutions of governance themselves prevent the people from exercising any decision-making power. In fact, they remove decision-making from the people and place it in with the elite, the bureaucracies and the rich. Connolly considered governments in such societies to be no more than committees of the rich to administer the affairs of the capitalist class. This system of governance cannot be democratised by reform. New institutions and processes will have to be created in order to empower the people in their society and give them real decision-making power over everything that affects their lives. In Ireland today, north and south, the interests of imperialism and capitalism are promoted at the expense of the interests of the people. And the people are unable to exercise any meaningful control individually or collectively over their society and their lives. The partition of Ireland must be opposed and a real national democracy established throughout Ireland. It is only through the achievement of a national democracy, that is a real democracy, sovereignty and independence, that the interests of the Irish people can be secured and implemented, and they can determine together their relations with each other and the nature of the society they create collectively and live in. Only then will the reconquest of Ireland become a reality. Thank you. You never thought you'd get sunburned in November down in West Cork, did you?
Guramattagut, Jimmy. Comrades, we are deeply honoured to have here Sean Kelleher, Macla, Tom Kelleher, to sing The Boys of Kilmichael. Sean.
Kilmichael Corda, and one more done Savannah shop. I hope my throat will be all right. Whilst we honour in song and in story the memory of Pearson MacBride, whose names are illumined in glory with martyrs who long since have died. Forget not the boys of Kilmichael, those brave lads so gallant and true, who fought neath the green flag of Erin and conquered the red, white and blue. On the 28th day of November, the Tans left the town of Macroom. They were armed in 2 Quarsley tenders, which brought them right into their doom. They were on the road to Kilmichael, and never expected to stall, till they met with the boys of the column, who made a queen sweep of them all. So here's to the boys of Kilmichael, those brave lads so gallant and true, who fought neath the green flag of Erin and conquered the red, white and blue. The sun in the west it was sinking, 'twas the eve of a cold winter's day, when the clans we were wearily waiting came into the spot where we lay. And over the hill went the echo, the peal of the rifle and gun, and the flames from the glories gave tidings that the boys of the column had won. So here's to the boys of Kilmichael, those brave lads so gallant and true, who fought neath the green flag of Erin and conquered the red, white and blue. The lorries were ours before twilight, and high over Dunmanway town the sun in the still air was gleaming to show that the Tans had gone down. We gathered our rifles and bayonets and soon left the glen so obscure, and never drew rail till we halted at the faraway camp in Gronure. So here's to the boys of Kilmichael, those brave lads so gallant and true, who fought neath the green flag of Erin and conquered the red, white and blue. Forget not the boys of Kilmichael, those brave lads so gallant and true, who fought neath the green flag of Erin and conquered the red, white and blue.
Very good. Very good. Very good. Very good. Very good. Very good.
There's a small event here. These men want to make a presentation, and then we'll have the national anthem, I think.
Yeah, and then it's the national anthem.
Okay, so.
Stay there, Tommy. Stay there.
Sure.
Will I say what the...
Do you? What?
Just let the traffic by. You stand and shoot.
We now Cardi Gael have Donegal O'Shea here, who's the current Cathaoirleach, the current chairman of the Kilmichael and Prosperity Commemoration Committee, whose father, Sean O'Shea, a great Republican from Skibbereen, died very recently in his 98th year, I think, Donegal, wasn't that right? In 98th year. He died recently in his 98th year, Donegall's father. And Donegal now is going to present a copy of the Wild Heather Glen, the Kilmichael Story of Grief and Glory, a book that was written 95, republished more recently, and is going to present it to Tommy McCartney and comrades. Donegal.
Tá fáilte ar ceann an cuiste comóra Kilmhaíl agus Crossavarig bhhailm fáilte a chuiríomh gach duine a tháinig an seo inmh ó Cínas ó Congra go hara ó Cúnta Hiarán Captain agus ó áit eile. Agus ar ceann an cuiste bhhailm an leabhar seo, leabhar beag seo a fáil síoch in uair 2005 agus aon sin sé an scéal fí Kilmhaíl a go hara agus fí na fear go léir a tríd an seo agus Bhí hart fí dahad daoine ag páirteach sa cá seo I Kilmhaíl. Bhí trocha sé le daoine leis an colún rathe agus bhí scoutaí ann comá agus daoine eile nach iad ag comhrú leis an lícáin seo. Agus aon sin sé an scéal fí na fear go léir a tríd an seo agus cad a hála do na daoine sin iní cá Kilmhaíl agus an gandát an trúr léic a hit an seo. Mícheál McCarrig, Seamus O'Sullivan agus Pádraig Ó Déisig. Agus tá sé anna himúil an na scéal, tá scéal fí gach duine a tríd an seo, agus tá sé anna himúil. Agus aon sin sé cad a hála dóibh agus cad a rinne siad. Tá sé anna himúil, tá sé tá an leabhar seo siimplí agus tá sé anna himúil ag inis bálam an I would like, at this stage now, I would like to present this leabhar, the story of Kilmichael, Story of Grief and Glory, the Wild Heather Glen. It's a small little booklet, but it's very interesting because it tells the story about all the volunteers, where they came from. Many of them are farmers and farm tradesmen and so on and so forth. Many of them are full-time with the Flying Column as well. And it's a very interesting, as you know, of course, the three men that died here as well. It also remembers those, and that's why we come here the 28th of November, as close as possible to that date every November. And we're glad to say that over the years we have invited many speakers from the north in particular, especially when there was censorship here in the south. We had many speakers from the north, and we're proud of that fact. So, Inish Brunham and Laura Shaw are Thomas McCartney agus Shifsha Galea.
Liam ar an fibre deire a chuir leis an ócéad seo le rán na bhíon.